the knowledge that people need to grasp. There's so many people that don't know what they don't know, and that is a danger to them.
But here's the number one thing everyone should do. They should learn, meaning, okay, AI is out there. There's 100,000 AIs every month being generated. It is incumbent upon any CIO, CSO, CTO, CFO, anybody in the C-suite should be studying AI and understanding what the types of AIs they are, how they can embrace it for their business, etc. Hello, everyone, and welcome to TopCyberPro.com's podcast. I'm the founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com. My name is Jim West. With me today, I have a great guest here, a cybersecurity engineer, architect, expert. There's a lot of accolades I can put to this guy's name, but he's also known commonly as just Luke Morgan. So, Luke Morgan, welcome. Thank you for joining me on this podcast today. Let's just get started with you just saying a little bit about yourself and what the type of work that you do, other titles you've had, and just in general, what do you do in the cybersecurity?
All right. Glad to be here, Jim. Thank you for the invite. It was good hearing from you last Wednesday. So my titles have been everything, like you said earlier, architect, principal engineer, cybersecurity architect, CSFC engineer, CSFC architect, quantum computing or quantum resistant computing expert, just jack of all trades, if you will.
You said something, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you gave an acronym that a lot of people watching this video may not be familiar with, but you said, I believe it was CSFC, which
yes,
if I'm correct, it stands for Commercial Solutions for Classified.
Correct. And that's an NSA program of record, where we take a layered network approach, where we do either MACsec, IPsec over MACsec, or we do IPsec over IPsec. And there's a lot more involved than just that, but that just, if we're going to distill it, it gets down to that, where you take a lot of separation of duties, you take a lot of separation of the people and the processes, etc. And you build this network that is as close to being unhackable as it can be. But again, I've also taught classes on when your CSFC network gets cracked, what do you do? And I've taught that at some facilities that are very much underground and blah, blah, blah. I'll skip into that.
To give another perspective for the people watching, Commercial Solutions for Classified. In DoD, there's a term for a type of network or enclave that's cryptographically isolated. It's more commonly known as a Type 4 cryptographically isolated network. And so it's kind of taking two Type 4 networks and running them one through the other using separate cryptographic libraries, leveraging things like IPsec, MACsec, like TLS protocols, etc., in a layered solution that has several monitoring points for ingress, egress, and leveraging PKI very heavily. Key exchange is really important. And as you mentioned, the feeding or breaking or cracking these type of solutions all come down to cryptography. And you also mentioned some of your titles before I interrupted you, was dealing with quantum cryptography and etc. So since we're mentioning quantum and we just got done talking about CSFC, could you explain a little bit about your work within quantum cryptography? Because that's something that's very interesting for a lot of folks. In fact, one of my talks that I do about the real threat of quantum computing, I talk about CSFC in particular as being the only solution that exists today that can delay or stem off an attack from like a quantum supercomputer, if you will. But let's just talk more about the work that you do today, because a lot of people like to talk to theories about what the future looks like. But let's talk about the work that you do today in quantum.
So today we use a piece of software that comes from the NSA called, PASS? What? I can't even remember the name. It's been so long since I've had to build it. But basically, there's some software from the NSA that publishes, based on the inputs you give it, it gives you quantum resistant passwords or keys that you then feed into your systems in those two layers that you have, or the minimum of two layers. And a lot of times we'll have three, or even in tactical situations, will have more than that. So we really just get down to passwords and passkeys or pre-shared keys that can't be readily decrypted by a cryptanalytically relevant quantum computer, which, there's a lot of folks working on them. There's a lot, and when I say a lot of folks, I mean at state level, not at the, you and I and our hackery little home labs, etc. So there's billions of dollars being spent towards this. But if you take a regular, pre-shared key, which is going to be using, half of the character space and maybe 32 bits or 32 bytes of a key, a regular computer can get through that in a couple days. Just by crunching, just serially crunching every single password that it can come up with, whether it be the key space or if that you've got a minimum of 16 characters, you're going to start with 16 characters, go out to 16, go out to 24, go out to 32, etc. So there's a lot of hints that you get, especially in the STIGs, that'll tell you your password's going to be at least this complex. Well, that makes a regular computer really key in to what to guess for a password or a pre-shared key. The quantum resistant ones, the quantum computer is going to address it at 256 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times in 1 second what the state of that password is going to be. But if you can get it so random with so much entropy, then you've got some resistance. But then, say you've got that risk of that one tunnel that wasn't that resistant or wasn't as resistant as you thought it had, you've got that second tunnel there, and it's going to slow you down. And with the monitoring points that you mentioned, we're going to detect that behavior, or we're going to detect that anomaly, and hopefully keep the bad guys out. We can shut and typically we go to a fail secure, where we shut the network down, and we don't go to a fail safe, which is open the network up.
Yes.
So,
well, I didn't mean to get so far technical right off the jump, but I'm glad we did, because we got to talk about commercial solutions for classified, which for anyone out there, just Google it, commercial solutions for classified. It's public information on the NSA's public website. Any person, individual can read about it, look at all the documentation. But at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road as far as the architecture and the engineering of those solutions, that's up to folks like Luke Morgan. I've done it myself as well for CSFC architecture. So designing these solutions, they're complex, they're layered, and they're very purposeful as far as how they do security and overlay. When we talk about defense in depth, to me, CSFC is one of the most accurate defense in depth solutions that I've ever seen and ever worked with. But to kind of segue away from that, because we kind of went into the weeds a bit, and my apologies for anyone watching this video going, oh my God, quantum computing, key exchange, CSFC. But let's just kind of take it way, way, way back, Luke, because I like to ask a lot of folks that I interview, because we all had, some of us had started with one career path and found ourselves at a crossroads. But what was your story for getting into IT cyber? Let's go way back when you was a young whippersnapper and you decided, hey, I think this is the path I want to go to. So you mind sharing that story with us?
Absolutely. So I was a geek. I used to take apart all my toys, especially my two-way radios, my walkie-talkies, my CBs, etc. But my father had a small business, and his network, his 5 computers had Lantastic.
Wow.
And
going way back.
Yeah, so there was this huge autoexec.bat file to connect all the computers up to each other to this common share, and then there was a printer off of the server, if you will, connected to LPT1 off of that device. And that's going way back into history, because we don't deal with LPT1 or any of that type of devices anymore. So, but that was the printer that was on this network.
Was that a dot matrix printer?
It was a dot matrix. We didn't have lasers. We didn't have inkjets. We didn't have anything. It was the old dot matrix that, you had to tear the sides off of it. And then it had a carbon copy on the back. So you'd have your your invoice in one, and then you'd have your receipt in the other. So that was my foray, was trying to get those computers to boot faster. Because what was happening was, if one of the computers would go down, which was very common, power supplies were garbage back in those days. So, 1 out of 5 computers wouldn't boot up Monday morning, and it would take 20 minutes to get the business started. So for my father, that was a very, it cost them money, because the phone would ring and they couldn't get on the computer. They were waiting for Windows. Well, I guess it wasn't even Windows. It was DOS 622 to open up, so they could get into their database. So yeah, I started in computing way before Windows 3, which really, like Windows 1 and 2, they never really existed in the commercial space.
Yeah,
but
started Windows 3.1.1 when networking was introduced into Windows, from what I remember.
Yeah, Windows for Workgroups was the one that really had, the 8 floppy disks that you could connect with NetBEUI, all your machines, your printers, etc. So yeah, I was a geek all through that period. So I would say I was in the prime of the prime age of computing, if you will.
You went from floppy disks to hard drives. That was the era, right? So,
right.
Talking about how you got started, and you got started really early, like, serial bus networks with floppy disk, etc. What was your experiences in your early part of your career, getting opportunities? Because also at the same time, we were about to enter into what eventually became the dot-com bust. But there was a glory time where Microsoft and IBM were still kind of at odds. There was new peripherals being developed almost every month. Did you find yourself into where you needed to get like more of an institutionalized type of like a degree, or was you just dabbling with some certifications, or was it just your experience and know-how and you was just the guy? People just knew you and your reputation preceded you.
It was just my experience, and I was sleeping at work. Literally I would spend 90 hours a week banging into the computer. And these are the old IBM click style keyboards that, with the tactical feedback. So I'm trying to think back of some of the early technologies I worked on. For internet service providers, there was, the internet was new, dial-up was new, Prodigy had just come out, AOL had just, spawned as the replacement for Prodigy. I was just a geek. I was just absorbing all of that and just loving every minute of it.
Which is great. I mean, having hands-on experience and just tinkering around and figuring things out is an excellent way to learn. A lot of folks still learn that way, right? But at what point in your career would you say any kind of education started to make a difference for you? Like, for example, you mentioned networking, you mentioned a little bit of engineering, but was there ever a point where, okay, I need to go get a degree, or I need to go study and get this body of knowledge, get the certification that kind of took you to another level in your career?
I would say it was really after I was at a company that ended up being bought by Sprint, where I needed to do Ethernet performance analysis. And I needed to be an expert at that, and knowing how everything going across the wire was happening and any errors that were occurring, because, we didn't have high-speed networks. 10 base T or 10 base 2 was the common network back then. So a single issue with the transceiver going bad was a problem. So I went to school. I actually went to Symmetricom out in San Jose for a couple weeks to learn, and I got my first certificate out there at their training center. And from there, I went to school. I went to University of New Mexico. New Mexico State University. Okay. Wow, that was a huge screw up.
That's okay.
So I went to New Mexico State University for networking. And learned Linux there, learned Unix, learned TCP/IP, learned NetBEUI, some of these older legacy protocols. But it was really certs weren't a huge push back then. The CCIE was out, but it was still teaching protocols like IPX, SPX, BGP4. I don't think even existed at the time. So there was a lot of these protocols that we use today and take for granted today that weren't mature enough then, and so I wasn't really into those. But there was, there were some Microsoft certs available. So, but it was just the experience that
Yes.
that kind of pushed me, and that, in my junior year of college, I was actually teaching classes at school for one of the professors.
Wow.
It was when he was out of school, and it was me and one of the other guys that worked in our computer lab. We would teach the junior level classes as juniors, but we weren't in those classes because we already knew the material, because we worked in the computer lab. And so we were doing this stuff as a practice already. We were running, NT Server 4.0, NT Server 351, Windows for Workgroups, and we had all of these scripts, to build custom images for the Windows group machines, etc. So,
well, it sounds like you was kind of early in the tech revolution, if you will. We're talking late 80s, early 90s, and you just kind of really got a lot of hands-on early in your career. And again, a lot of these technologies, some of them are still around today. A lot of them have been replaced or succeeded by something newer. But let's talk about today, right? Present day. In your opinion, and from your perspective, with everything that you see in industry and within the world today, let's take it to the current threats. Or, back then it was just about getting people connected. You mentioned about machines booting up for the business to operate. That's what the problems used to be. Like, how can we get our businesses online? How can we get the links up and communicate with everybody? Well, now our world's changed where everything's interconnected. We got Internet of Things. We got everybody, communicating near wire, instantaneous. So what, in your perspective, are the current threats that, like, senior leaders or anyone watching this video that wants to know immediately, what's the top 3 threats today from your perspective as a principal engineer, architect? What would you say?
I don't know if I can narrow it down to 3, Jim, but I will just say the first thing is probably going to be one of the issues you've got as a CEO of TopCyberPro.com, is that your ability to evangelize is great, but the knowledge that people need to grasp, there's so many people that don't know what they don't know, and that is a danger to them. That you evangelize very well, but it's getting that message out more and more. And I hope, through things like this podcast, you can do that. So I'd say that's the biggest danger, is the people not knowing what they don't know. The next is there's bad guys. They hate us. They want to disrupt you. They want to disrupt your grandmother. They want to get money. Because that's the one thing is, phishing attacks where people in AI, when they come after folks and say, hey, blah, 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 I've got your kid held at ransom, or I'm your kid, I need ransom money, and your grandmother doesn't know any better. So she's going to the store and buying all these gift cards and giving away all the numbers. And that's a huge one right now. That's a huge threat. Then there's just active cyber attacks where, your network can get infiltrated and there's ransomware put on, and now all of a sudden you've lost your database. You've lost all of your company assets. You can't compute. You can't work. And I've seen that with so many organizations where they just choose to ignore the CIO or the CFO, who I think are the chief risk officers for a company. Again, this gets back to the evangelization of cyber threats. And these people in these high executive positions just don't appreciate that the risks are there.
I agree with you, Luke. I think, like you said, the first part is the whole evangelizing information, right? There's a lot of bad information, and a thing I like it's called fear bias, right? So you have an individual, let's say that their fear is AI, they believe in the Terminator series from James Cameron. They think that AI is going to take over the world. So they'll advise their business leaders, we need to stay far away from it. It's dangerous, but not realizing that at some point, if AI can do routine operations like what a human would do and do it at wire speed, why not embrace the good of something, a new technology? And, because if you don't embrace the technology and harness the benefits of it, you're going to be left behind. So sometimes fear bias, lack of information. But here's the number one thing everyone should do. They should learn, meaning, okay, AI is out there. There's 100,000 AIs every month being generated. it is incumbent upon any CIO, CSO, CTO, CFO, anybody in the C-suite should be studying AI and understanding what the types of AIs they are, how they can embrace it for their business, etc. And then the other part about, you're talking there about how, people just need to understand that there is a skills gap in cybersecurity, and not just because someone proclaims to be an expert, has, a couple acronyms behind their name, doesn't necessarily mean they have the experience or the wisdom of applying any knowledge that they might have learned to given situations of solving problems and trying to chart a path through all of the threat actors you mentioned, whether nation state, a bunch of criminal hacking groups that are doing massive phishing campaigns. I think that a lot of education from the general public, that groups like CISA is a great group for the United States that has been putting out a lot of campaigns for general cyber awareness for the American public. But I think we need even more campaigns. We need campaigns that are launching on, like, a Super Bowl commercial, talking to people about phishing, etc. We need that kind of broad distribution impact for both general public as well as public-private sector. There's a lot of they need to wake up and understand, if they go about their day-to-day thinking it's never going to happen to me, that's you're leaving the door open for the really bad things to happen.
Absolutely.
So, Luke, let's talk about, we talked a little bit about your early career. We talked about, your focus on what you see as threats today. Let's say there's people watching this video going, you know what? I'm looking at this guy. He's an engineer, architect. He's done it all. He's got like 30 years experience. If someone's watching this video going, how do I start today? What would you recommend for someone that says, hey, today's my day one. I made up my mind. I want to be in cyber. What are some certs or some websites or resources that you would recommend to someone to just start reading and getting into?
I would say first, well, it looks like that individual has a passion for IT. And that's what we used to call cyber in the old days, if you will, was information technology. But now we've moved well beyond that into the cyber realm, which is the networking of things. So I would say, look at your Security Plus cert. Look at your Network Plus. Look at some of what could be kind of a remedial certification, if you will, but like how to build a PC. There's things like you've got your CPU, you've got your memory, you've got your hard drive, you've got your RAM, you've got your IO, your keyboard, your mouse, your monitors, etc. Learn how all of those things work and interact, and learn how to build, go into Newegg or go into Amazon, buy and build your own computer for $600 and make a gaming computer. Calculate how big of a power supply you need based on all your components. Look at the wattage there. Calculate the size of your ups, because you're going to want to have a battery backup, especially if you have a gaming PC. So I would start with those type of certs and then get into some of the funner ones, like the CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker. That's probably the funnest cert I ever got, because there you get to practice active hacking, but you're doing it. Where I actually did it, we did it on a commercial network and got in trouble for it. But this was over in Thailand, where I took my CEH course and then did the test for it.
Well, nowadays they do it in a lab virtual environment. So, kind of add to that CEH, I would tell people, hack the box, try hack me. There's, if you just Google free hacking training sites, there's so many out there. So anyone watching this video, if you get to a site that wants you to pay thousands or hundreds of dollars for a license or access or member fee, there's at least 20 plus sites that are free, that'll let you do virtual box sessions, etc., where you can learn how to do the different hacking techniques and so forth. So, but what are some resources that about, like sites they could read, or what would be, I guess a better word to phrase it, if someone's starting today, what do you think are the top 1-2 career paths that they should be looking at? Is it still networking systems or pure cyber, RMF, threat intelligence? Where would you say people need to focus on if they really want to go after the hot jobs today?
Yeah, I would say get into the foundations first. Get into the networking and the computing, and then move into cyber. And that's just my recommendation. And I'm just one kid out here, and well, I'm not even a kid anymore. I'm nearly 50 years old with this gray beard, kind of like you. But I would say, if you've developed the passion for it and you're starting today, there's so many free resources. Get on Google, do searches, do other things. I don't like using Google as a term to replace the word search, but use that tool to find the free resources. Microsoft has great labs with their Contoso lab or the contoso.com and all of their stuff. Learn how to do PKI, learn how to do Active Directory. Amazon has great resources. There's so much free stuff. You can go into Reddit and just go into one of the networking or the home lab or whatever and just post something wrong.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to correct you.
You're going to get a bunch of corrections. Yeah.
So, there's just so many resources to be found, but don't go out and spend $10,000 to get your CISSP. You don't need to do that. Because that's just one of those certs that, I've got it, but I carry that. And it's just so I could trump all my other ones and not have to worry about the lower level ones. But yeah, there's just so many resources. I mean, I spend all day on my computer, and I've got my little work screen up here on one side, and then I've got my learning over here. And you've got to learn something every day, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's containers, Kubernetes, Docker, ethical hacking, IPsec, whatever technology, MPLS. I mean, whatever it is you want to learn about. There's a million resources for it. I love going into some of the troubleshooting forums, especially for vendors on their equipment, and seeing like the use cases that people are coming up with. Because there's things that, I can't imagine somebody using a VPN to do some of the things they do with it, or, especially like the DM VPN and stuff, where you're just all over the planet and you're trying to connect all these hundreds and thousands of machines together. So yeah, just get online and search.
Yeah.
And
I think what you said earlier, you mentioned in a word, passion, have the drive to keep reading, keep learning something new every day, because you'll never learn it all. And even if you've read it once, you might forget it. And then later, that's what teams are for, and online forums, is to put out questions, put out, even the wrong answer, and then get corrected. There's nothing wrong with trying to, iron sharpens iron, and getting, networking with other professionals, as well, through your LinkedIn, social media platforms, etc., is very important, because you can read articles that people are sharing, the articles that people are writing. But yeah, I think definitely read. I always say to people, if you can read and comprehend, you could do cybersecurity. And so that's usually what I tell people. So Luke, let's change it up a little bit. Let's do some quick questions just for some levity. Again, we started off real tech heavy with quantum and crypto and all this, but let's do some rapid fire questions. And again, there's no right or wrong answers. Okay. So first one up, Star Trek or Star Wars? Which one?
I'm actually more entertained by Star Trek.
Okay.
I do like watching the Star Wars movies, but because Star Trek had the series with all of the continuum, and then you've got what's the new movie or the new series that came out after the Orville?
Yes,
it's very much similar with Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah,
MacFarlane. I think there's very much continuity, so I appreciate that, and that all of that went into it, and it's not just the George Lucas merchandising, but I still appreciate that. My first name's Luke, so I always got the Luke Skywalker thing, and I love both. But I would have to say, if one were on the TV screen, I'm going to go for Star Trek, because Scotty's building the transparent aluminum to haul the whales.
Yeah,
and that
all the whales. Or when they got on the mice and they were like, "Hello, computer."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is just more entertainment, and there's more humor, if you will, built in, or subtle humor.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right.
All right. So next question: cake or pie?
Pie.
Pie. What particular fruit or vegetable flavor of pie?
Pecan pie. And you've had my wife's pecan pie.
It is one of the best pecan pies I've actually ever eaten. So yeah, pecan pie. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Now this is a little bit more difficult. Okay, so here's the next one. The next one is, let's see, 1 second. The next question is a hot dog a sandwich?
Whew. If you're in the Middle East, it's a sandwich.
It's a sandwich. Only when you're in the Middle East?
That's so I've not been in a lot of other places. I've never ordered a hot dog in Turkey, and that's kind of the northern East. But yeah, they call a shawarma a sandwich in the Middle East as well, and it's anything with bread and a protein in the middle.
Okay.
To them. So I would say because it's not two pieces of bread, that's not a sandwich. So that includes.
You need bread separation. 2 layers of bread is what you're saying.
So Subway has a sub, but I don't call that a sandwich because it's a single piece of bread that's got a little carving
in the middle
for the protein, the cheeses, and the toppings.
Okay. All right. So here's one for the Reddit army. That's a question I love to ask. Would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? So one big horse-sized duck or 100 tiny duck-sized horses.
Well, as we all know, horses are assholes. And they bite and they kick. And I don't know if you've ever seen a horse kill a mountain lion.
No.
But they do. They will bite a mountain lion, throw it in the air, and then kick it with its hind legs.
Wow.
So if they're duck-sized, which is about the same size as a cat, then I'm going to go with the horse-sized duck.
The horse-sized?
Because then you just can choke the stupid thing.
Okay.
And have something to eat, have some good protein to eat later.
All right. Well, Luke, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast, man, and I appreciate you answering all the questions. I knew I'd throw some ones right there at the end at you, and I'm glad that we get to talk a little bit about the quantum and CSFC. And again, to remind people watching this, Google CSFC, commercial solutions for classified. The information is on their website. It is definitely it's not just something that just anybody in their garage can instantly do, but you can read enough documentation to get an understanding of what that solution is and how that layered solution really does protect, 2 independent cryptographically isolated networks. Again, to me, it's the only solution we currently have that could stave off a quantum computer attack. A brute force quantum supercomputer attack. Let me be clear on my wording, because a lot of times, as you mentioned earlier, Luke, there's quantum proof and there's quantum resistant. If you read the letters from the agency and the stuff on the internet, our current algorithm set, the CNSA 2.0 suite, those algorithms have been labeled quantum resistant. There's no way we will know that they're quantum proof until we have a quantum supercomputer and they can be tested against that. So again, a lot of exciting things in our future. Some people think it's doomsday, but I always like to think that there's always hope to develop more and more emerging technology to meet those challenges and demands. But it takes folks like Mr. Morgan, myself, and others that are watching this to come together, learn everything we can, apply what we've learned to become better security professionals so we can support our organizations better. So once again, Luke, anything you'd like to share with anyone watching? Again, folks that are thinking about going into cyber, folks that are in cyber, want to know what to do to get to the next level. What is some advice you'd give anyone?
Hey, Jim, just proud to be on your show today. And I would just say, just make sure you've got a passion for IT, for cyber before you get into it. Because if you don't, it's really just going to beat you up. And just don't get put down. Don't worry. If your first network gets hacked, don't worry. Just build a better one next time. It happens. Don't worry if your computer crashes. Don't worry. You didn't have a backup. I don't back up my computer. Guess what? My computer crashes. I just build it over again. And I'm years into the business. So, but I know it's best practice to back up computers, and I tell people all the time to do that. But it's honestly, it's not something I practice.
We're all human beings at the end of the day. So, well, again, Mr. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been TopCyberPro.com's podcast, and I hope you, the viewer, got some great information out of this. And I hope that you decide to continue your journey in cybersecurity or to join us to close the cybersecurity skills gap. So, once again, that's been Jim West and Luke Morgan, and this has been TopCyberPro.com's podcast.